Our movie begins with a guy named Lewis sitting in a restaurant, intent on Kathy, the owner of a flower store. She returns to the same restaurant a few moments later and places her order with the waiter. Lewis observes Kathy while she eats and then exits the restaurant. When Kathy arrives in the parking lot, Louis is already inside his car. He exits the vehicle and returns with a gun. Lewis follows Kathy and hides her face with a bag when she returns. Kathy struggles but eventually manages to remove the cover. Unfortunately, the guy nearby is not hearing her screams because he is listening to music. Lewis then shackles her hands and feet and tapes her lips shut. He then drives over and places Kathy in the trunk of his car. Lewis drives to his house, pulls Kathy inside, and locks her in a small, soundproof room. The room is concealed behind a wall. Lewis checks on Kathy again after clearing up the evidence from his car. He tells her that screaming is pointless because she is in a soundproof room. Kathy begins screaming as soon as he removes the tape from her mouth. Lewis inquires about her name, but Kathy continues to scream. As a result, he locks her in the room and turns off the light. Through his computer, he can hear everything Kathy says. Meanwhile, Kathy relaxes and searches for a way out of the room. She spots something happening on the roof and begins shouting harder, but no one can hear her. Lewis reminds her that screaming is pointless and that they should get down to business. Kathy begs him not to touch her and offers him money to bribe him, but Lewis mocks her, stating that a flower shop owner doesn't have that kind of money. He then states that money is not what he desires. Lewis then pulls out his rifle and approaches Kathy. He insists that she tell him her name, and Kathy introduces herself as Kathy Nolan. Lewis is dissatisfied for whatever reason and departs. Kathy gets her hands in front of her, and when Lewis returns, she assaults him as Kathy tries to crawl away from him. Lewis grabs her by the feet, but she fights back. Kathy then stands up and smacks Lewis in the face. She enters the living room and attempts to get assistance, but Lewis shoots his revolver. Soon after, the two of them fight, and Kathy manages to knock Lewis out. She locates her cell phone but cannot receive a signal. She takes a knife from the kitchen drawer and cuts the cords that are tying her feet together. She tries to flee by opening the door, but it won't open while she pleads for help. Lewis gets up and asks her what she's attempting to do. Kathy motions for him to step back and points the knife at him. Lewis takes a seat at the table and invites Kathy to join her. He asks her to repeat her name, and she confirms that it is Kathy Nolan. When Kathy eventually sits, Lewis is once again disappointed. Lewis gives her some food, but she declines. Lewis informs her that if he actually meant to murder her, he would have done so by now. Lewis asks her name for the third time, and she says her name is Kathy Nolan. This time, Lewis becomes enraged and hurls his plate in Kathy's face. He aims his rifle at her, but she swerves and Lewis drops the weapon. The two then engage in a violent fight, attacking each other. Lewis eventually subdues Kathy and brings her back into the padded room. After a while, Lewis's helper Alondra returns home and is taken aback by the state of the house. Lewis then assures her that he is good and asks her to take the day off. Alondra promises to return the next day with his daughter Summer, and he agrees. While he takes a shower, Kathy pulls out her phone from her pocket and attempts to make a call. However, there is no signal. Lewis returns to the padded room with a gun and begins questioning Kathy. He wants to know more than just her name this time. Kathy responds to all of his queries, but he suspects she is lying about everything. He then asks her where she was born again when Kathy mentions California. He inquires once more. Lewis becomes enraged and shoots his gun after she gives him the same response. He asks her where she was born for the last time. Kathy then mentions Green Bay, Wisconsin. Lewis then lowers his gun. Kathy finally begins to be honest, and Lewis admits that he now knows everything about her since he is receiving what he wants from her. When she claims her name is Kathy, Lewis asks her again. Lewis claims that Kathy was the name of her late twin sister. Kathy ultimately admits to being Natalie. Lewis reminds Natalie that she already understands why she was brought here after her confession. He then exits the room. Natalie screams once again to vent her rage. She even tries to pick up a broken piece from the floor. Meanwhile, Lewis sits in the living room, watching a video of his baby. Natalie pulls out her phone and places it near the vent. Finally, she dials 911 for assistance. However, the signal is feeble and the line is disconnected. Lewis has already determined that Natalie's phone is missing, so he comes in with a rifle, finds the phone, and breaks it. Lewis then begins questioning Natalie further. He wants to know where she worked as a nurse and how many patients died while she was caring for them. Lewis eventually admits that one of those patients was his wife. He asks Natalie whether she recalls Alana, Matthew Lewis, and Natalie nods. On the other hand, defends herself by asserting that all of the nurses were acquitted throughout the trial. Lewis then asks her why she left. She responds that she needed a fresh start. Lewis also wants to know what happened to his wife's wedding band. Finally, he claims that while he knows his wife doesn't drink much, Alina was drunk and high on drugs the day she died. Natalie expresses her condolences for his loss, but Lewis informs her that he is imprisoning her because she murdered his wife, and he's curious as to why Lewis views another video of his wife and their daughter, which causes him to cry. Meanwhile, Natalie is still attempting to remove the broken shard off the floor when Lewis returns to the room. Enraged, Natalie begins to speak. She admits that she and her sister were pious and nurtured in a church. Their father had abandoned them for another woman, and her sister had committed suicide. Natalie claims they were punished for their father's transgressions. She then began a life of service by caring for hospital patients. She admits that the people who died in her care committed adultery, exactly like her father. Finally, Natalie claims that Lewis's wife was having an affair with him. He simply cannot believe it. However, Natalie continues to speak and claims that Atlanta was not wearing her wedding ring because she was sleeping with another man. Aletta had crashed into a motel while drinking. Lewis then aims the gun at her and tells her to stop talking. Natalie, unfazed, claims that the Bible says marriage should be honored, and his wife was a sinner, a nasty woman. Finally, she admits to killing Atlanta. Lewis exits the room and watches another Atlanta video. He notices Natalie canceling an incoming call and knows she may be telling the truth to blow off some steam. Lewis takes a drive and stops near a lake. Suddenly, two cops arrive and question him. Lewis carefully answers their questions because they were looking into Natalie's phone call. They apologize for the inconvenience and leave when Lewis comes home into the padded room. He has no idea Natalie has managed to take the shard of tile from the ground. Lewis tells her that she had no right to take his wife away from him, and he is at a loss for words with his daughter. Summer is correct. Natalie then stabs him with a tidal shot, kicks him many times and strikes him in the face, and escapes out the door. Natalie grabs a knife on her way out and returns to the room, only to discover that it is empty. Lewis tries to shut the door, but Natalie stops him. The two engage in another violent struggle, and Natalie tackles Lewis as he reaches for the gun. Natalie, on the other hand, gets the gun first. Summer and Alondra both walk in at the same time. They had no time to react. Natalie shoots Alondra and warns Lewis to keep his distance. She then grabs Summer and pulls out the revolver. Lewis implores her not to harm his daughter. Natalie mocks him, claiming that Summer is not his child. When Natalie threatens Summer, Lewis diverts her attention by telling her that everything she has said to him has been recorded. Summer takes advantage of the confusion and escapes Natalie's clutches. Lewis leaps on Natalie and chokes her till she collapses. When he tries to flee, Natalie awakens, and Lewis is forced to shoot her. After that, he discovers a terrified Summer crying inside the padded chamber. Lewis steals Natalie's confession recording and attempts to flee with Summer. Natalie, on the other hand, is waiting for them with the gun. Fortunately, the gun has run out of rounds and the two resume their struggle. They punch and stab each other in an attempt to prevent the other from getting control in the end. Lewis wins the fight by punching Natalie in the face, causing her to stumble and fall to the ground. Lewis rushes out of the garage as the door closes, trapping Natalie in the midst. Cops begin to arrive on the scene. Lewis pulls Summer closer to him and says, "I love you. You are my daughter." That's how our movie ends. See you next video. We hope that you enjoy your time and have a good day.